Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to be in conversation with Ana Maria Porras. And again, she's another virtual exchanger from the University of Florida. We've had quite a few of them on our virtual exchange YouTube channel lately. But please introduce yourself, Ana Maria, before we go on.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ana Maria Porras. I'm an assistant professor of biomedical engineering at the University of Florida.
And you have undertaken a virtual exchange with a partner from Colombia called Daniel Suarez Venegas, and it was entitled Comparing Perspectives on Global Health Tech. Tell us a bit more about that. Put it in context for our listeners.
Yeah, so the idea for this exchange started because I developed a new graduate elective in my department called Global Health and Biomedical Engineering. And when I went to our Office of Global Learning and I was like, here is my class, can you give me some feedback? These are some of the learning objectives. A couple of the learning objectives are comparing perspectives across like different perspectives on our biomedical engineering discipline. That's one of them, and communicating effectively across cultures. So I know you've interviewed Paloma, who's our director of the Office of Global Learning. So when I talked to Paloma, Paloma was like, I love these objectives, but you're not going to achieve them through conventional kind of practices that you would have in your mono culture. Well, here in the US, we do have students from a wide variety of backgrounds, but she was still like, it's going to be challenging to achieve, especially the communicating effectively across cultures. That's going to be hard to achieve on your own. But let me tell you more about virtual exchange.
So she had a paw in there immediately encouraging you.
Immediately, exactly. She was like, my office offers training on virtual exchanges and on how to do these, which I think is why so many of us at UF are implementing them, because the Office of Global Learning does offer training that helps lower that barrier of entry to attempt that in your classroom. And so I ran into my partner, Daniel, at a conference a little bit after that. And I already knew, I was like, I think I want to try this virtual exchange stuff, but I need a partner. So I met him and I was like, and I'm also from Colombia. So I was like, I'm teaching this class. I'm looking for a partner. Are you at all interested? He was like, yes, actually, I am very interested. I'm teaching somewhat of a similar class soon. And so the way we set up our exchange is our students work together to identify a global health problem in their partner's country. So my students try to identify a global health issue in Colombia. Danielle's students try to identify a health issue here in the United States, and then they propose a solution for it.
I want to go back because I see the exchange and they had to talk to each other to find out about the problem in their respective countries. How did you arrange the students? Was it pair work? Was it teams? How did you set them up? And how much information did you give them?
That's a very good question. So the first time we've done this exchange twice, the first time that we did it, well, both times it works the same. We've just had to play around with the numbers of students. So the first time that we did it, we divided each of our classes into teams. And so I think we're groups of 3, and then mine, the first time, because he had 12 students and I had 20, so it was a little bit of an imbalance. His teams had 3. I think one team had 4. And then my students were grouped in like 5 to 6. And so then that worked okay, but the first time it was too many of my students when they were working together. So then that was hard. So the following year we made it smaller, and it was actually the other way around. Like then I had 12 and he had 20. So then my students were working in pairs and then working with 3 or 4 of his students.
So what were some of the challenges you faced? You mentioned already there was a kind of imbalance according to numbers, but I'm also wondering, you're from Colombia, he's from Colombia, there must be Spanish in there must be English in there. What language was the lingua franca of your exchange, and how did the language all pan out?
Yeah, our lingua franca was English. The first year, we do have a lot of Spanish-speaking students at UF, but the first year that I taught the class, I didn't have that many in my classroom. Last year, I had more. So last year, it was more, there was almost one Spanish speaker per each of my groups of my peers, almost. And so then that helped some, but regardless, we normally communicate in English. Some things that we try to do to lower that anxiety, especially for the Colombian students, is provide as much of the instructions ahead of time, even for their one-on-one meetings. And we also try to encourage our students to like share the questions that they're going to ask in any Zoom meeting or anything like that ahead of time, so that the students for whom English is not their first language, which actually also includes several of my students here at UF, have time to think about what they want to say. But it's not, you're asking me that question, and I do pre, middle, and post exchange reflections. And for my students in the US, almost all of them cite, when I ask them, what are you worried about, in regards to this virtual exchange, almost always they cite, I'm a little bit concerned about if there's going to be a language barrier. I'm a little bit concerned that I might not know how to manage this language barrier, etc. And then, funnily enough, one of the coolest outcomes of the exchange, both times that we did it, is that by the end of the exchange, one of the things that the American students say that has surprised them the most is the quality of the English spoken by the Colombian students. And so that's kind of an interesting thing.
So presumably when maybe you fed that back to your partner and said, oh, my students were impressed by the English. So the Colombian students must have, it must have boosted their confidence in some way, which is exactly what a virtual exchange is also about, isn't it?
I agree. That's exactly, that's every time I see that, I go back to him and I was like, please share with your students that all my students were really impressed, that they don't end up reporting that there is a major language barrier. And I mean, it's hard because what they're discussing is highly technical content. And so
exactly.
it's right. It's like not your basic colloquial English. It's like a pretty advanced English. And so that I think has been really cool. And it's been really cool to break down assumptions that maybe our students have about proficiency in English in other parts of the world.
Exactly. Do you know what tools, if any, the students used to help with the language issue? Because you mentioned that you mitigated it by asking questions to be sent out in advance and giving them time. Presumably, was there other tech that the students used to help them with this issue?
I know one of the things we talked a lot about was how to add live captions on Zoom. And so I know some of that because Zoom can translate those captions to live. So we talked a lot about that. That is kind of an iffy technology in that sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I think it has to do with who scheduled the meeting and if their institution has kind of access to those more premium settings. So I know that's one technology that we have used. I know we often, so for some of the assignments, what we have them do is post videos on Padlet. And if I'm not mistaken, on Padlet, it can also caption. And even though, right, they might not be translated captions to Spanish, just the fact that you can see the written words, I think helps. So those are some of the other ways. I'm trying to think if there is any other thing that I know we have used. I think those are the main ones. I also know that in the maybe not their live interactions, but in looking up additional literature and stuff, one of the things that I have introduced our students to are, for example, YouTube. How do you activate, again, those auto-translate captions on YouTube so that they both sets of students can access content created in the other country, especially for our Colombian students, because it's rare that you're going to find statistics on the Colombian population in English. You either have to have your partners help you find that data, or you kind of go a little bit deeper and learn how to translate websites using Google and things like that.
So apart from, so that's one of the challenges, isn't it, the language thing. Did you have any other hurdles or challenges during the virtual exchange? What was difficult or what was problematic?
Yeah, there's been two things that were a little bit unexpected. So one, Our original intention was to have the exchange be graduate student to graduate students. But then my partner hasn't been able to have a high enough enrollment in his graduate class to make that happen. So we had to adapt a little bit. And so his students are undergraduate students and my students are graduate students. So sometimes that's a little bit of a challenge in that, especially for my students, sometimes I feel like they are a little bit frustrated than
because they
their
know
other
more or
students.
whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But I think it's worked out okay, because then in some ways my students can also mentor them on other things. I know my students have, for example, shared some information about how to apply to graduate programs in the US and things like that. So I feel like in
There's
the
some
end of it,
peer-to-peer learning going on anyway on some
I
level, isn't
agree.
there? Anyway.
Yeah. And like the main outcomes for me and for both of us for the exchange are less so the technical aspects and more so the cultural exchange and them learning how to communicate to each other. So like, yeah, I don't think it's as big of a deal as perhaps maybe the students sometimes perceive that to be. So in the second year, I try to address that head on and then just kind of highlight the positives. And so I think that worked a little bit better. And then the other thing that was a little bit of a challenge is that our academic calendars don't start at the same time. So they start a month earlier than we do. And so
Sure.
sometimes trying to figure out where in both of our semesters the exchange is going to fit and how to frame it, that can be a challenge. With the fact that fall, we always do this in the fall because that's when I teach this class, and fall is hurricane season in Florida.
Oh,
And
God,
so the first
an
exchange,
unexpected consequence.
yeah, so the first year we had one hurricane interruption during the exchange. So we've since learned that we just need to be really flexible on when the exchange is going to end. Then last year we had both in Colombia their fall break, and then we actually had two hurricane interruptions during the exchange. So, but I think that's easily solvable. We just learned we needed to be more flexible.
So finally, Ana Maria, I take it you're going to repeat your virtual exchange, and you've embedded it in. Is it kind of firmly embedded, and in your courses now?
Yeah, it's pretty embedded in the course. My course has really good word of mouth, and I think students share that we do a virtual exchange. So now I feel like if students enroll and there wouldn't be a virtual exchange, they would feel like I falsely advertised. So yes, we're gonna do it again in the fall. I'm not sure yet if Daniel will continue to partner with us. I am for sure going to be partnering with Tecnológico de Monterrey in Mexico
Oh,
this
wow.
fall. So, I mean, my hope is that we'll have a three-way exchange, because one of the things that I'm hoping to add more is more diversity in the projects. And one way to achieve that is by adding another country. So we don't know yet we're working on what the exact tasks and exchange is going to look like now that Monterrey is coming into the picture. But I'm excited to see what we come up with for the fall.
Well, I'm excited too. Maybe I'll ask you afterwards and we'll talk again and you can tell me how that went with a new partner.
For sure. I'm excited about that.
Thank you so much for your time, Ana Maria.
Thank you. This was fun.